Walter Isaacson. He is a highly respected figure in the worlds of journalism, academia, finance, business. He's built a stellar reputation for himself. He's the former editor of Time magazine, CEO of CNN, president of the Aspen Institute, amongst many other things. Here in New Orleans, he is the co-chair of the Louisiana Recovery Authority, and he's currently a professor at Tulane. He is the recipient of numerous awards, including the National Humanities Medal in 2023. Award-winning author, he's a historian. He's written biographies of some of the most important people of our time. Leonardo da Vinci, Albert Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, Jennifer Doudna, Steve Jobs, and his latest, Elon Musk. So he's from New Orleans, and maybe most importantly, member number 254 of the New Society. I would like for all of you to please welcome Walter Isaacson to the video.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks for all you do, Lindsay.
Thank you, Lindsay. Walter, thank you so much for being here.
Tim, after all these years.
After all these years. Still together, doing another dance. Just to set all this up, you spent 2 years,
Right.
100 hours, over 100 hours observing.
Felt like about 200.
200 hours, 150 people interviewed on record, and Elon gave you crazy open access. And as the amazing journalist you are and the things you talk about, people want to talk, you're willing to listen. So my first question, hardcore, surges, demon mode, trance-like periods, 7 or 8 Elons. Who is this guy?
Well, you're right. There's sort of multiple personalities, almost clinically, where he will just switch from being an inspiring guy talking about going to Mars into an engineering mode where he's going to focus on whether Inconel or stainless steel will be better for the shield of a Raptor engine. And sometimes he's in giddy mode. We got to look at Monty Python clips. And then you're right, he'll go into these dark demon modes when he's been challenged. And so there's a common theme, which is an intensity and an all-in intensity. And this is something this room would understand, which is, sometimes you want a good work-life balance where you're working, you value that type of atmosphere. But there are times when you're starting companies or you're really trying to build a company where you have to be all in and hardcore. He's very much a video gamer, and he says whenever he conquers a level of the game, which usually is pretty fast, he will stay up all night, he'll never sit back and rest. He's got to move to the next level.
So are there other human beings like this?
Steve Jobs was not dissimilar, and by the way, and this is not a how-to book. You shouldn't try to be this way. But if you look at Jeff Bezos in the early days of Amazon, you look at Bill Gates when he was starting Microsoft, there is a hardcore intensity. But of course, I always say, but there are also people who do it differently. Jennifer Doudna, who I wrote about last time, who co-invented the technology for editing our own genes and started a few companies based on CRISPR. She is a nurturing, kind, nice person. So there's not one way to live your life. You got to look inside yourself and say, what's the best, and what do I feel morally comfortable with?
So you and I have had a lot of conversations about the world and New Orleans. I'm interested in, did spending that much time with him change your worldview or how you think about things?
Well, I do, from every person I write about, try to bring certain lessons, whether it's Leonardo da Vinci marveling at observations of the most obvious things that you and I ignore, like why is the sky blue? And with Musk, one of the things that inspired me, and a lot of things that rattled me, but his higher sense of epic mission. He had 3 missions coming out of a pretty troubled childhood, with no friends, lonely, beaten up, and sitting in the corner of the library reading sci-fi and comics, which was, we have to become multiplanetary. In other words, human species needs to get to Mars and other planets. Number two, we have to have sustainable energy. And he did it believing we have to move into an era of electric vehicles, solar roofs, and battery pack. And number three, reading enough Asimov, he felt we have to make sure that our robots and our artificial intelligence becomes a help to humanity, not a threat to humanity. And I thought when he would espouse these epic visions, at first I thought it was the type of pontificating you do for a podcast or a team pep talk, but he would just incant these as if they were the drives that made him so hardcore. And I took from that you shouldn't focus on making the profits or making your quarterly returns or whatever. You should focus on having a real mission, and other things will follow from that.
So he believes that mission?
I do believe, now he doesn't always follow it, but I don't think he's, at first I thought he was just hyperventilating with him. But there'd be times when something would happen on a launch pad, or he would just, and he'd say, look, we'll never get to Mars if we don't get hardcore about this, or we'll never keep Tesla beating the internal combustion engine people. And I think he was hardcore about these missions, but almost in a way of the kid who reads, he said, I used to read about the superheroes in the comics, and they were trying to save the world. He said, but they were wearing their underpants on the outside, so they looked ridiculous. And then he paused and said, but at least they were trying to save the world. And I think he almost sees himself as a cross between an X-Man and a Captain Underpants trying to save the world.
Within your book, he has these grand visions, but he's also a micro detail executor.
Yeah.
And the algorithm, can you discuss Elon's algorithm?
Well, he's a serial monotasker, not a multitasker, but he will go with, 1 hour being focused on the valve of a Raptor engine, the next focused on how do you get uploads of video on Twitter. And he will, while focusing, not be distracted by anything. The night that the Twitter board decided to accept his offer, he was down in Boca Chica, Texas, a bit of Texas where the launch pad is for Starship, and everybody in the conference room is like, oh my God, but they don't say anything. And he is focused on a methane leak in one of the valves, and he doesn't say anything about Twitter, so he does that. The algorithm is something he used when he saved Tesla from going and spiraling out of control in 2018, but he also used it with the rocket manufacturing, which is he believes that the manufacturing of a product is as important or more important than the design or the creation of a product. Steve Jobs would create something unbelievably beautiful like the iPhone, and then it would be thrown over the wall to be manufactured in China, and Jobs didn't really care about that. Musk's main focus is on manufacturing, and that's where the algorithm comes in, which is especially after 2018 when things were spiraling down. He said, okay, we're going to have a certain way of doing things. Step one, question every requirement and every rule. If it's some regulator that tells you you need this, just question it. Don't do it. And he said there's no rules and no laws except for the laws of physics. Everything else is just a recommendation. And step two is delete, delete, delete. Once you realize you don't need that bolt, you don't need that, extra engine. And it goes on like that. There are 5 steps, including simplify. And then speed up the process so that anything that on any station of your line, or any part of any process, it doesn't have to be assembly, it could be, part of an electrical process, you can double the speed if you try. And only step 5 is that then you automate.
I was fascinated how all these amazing engineers, and he would say, this is wrong, and they were like, no, it's not. but he was more right than wrong.
He has a fingertip feel for the physics of properties and materials. And he could be wrong. I mean, he's wrong on a lot of things he's done with what he now calls X, the platform of Twitter. And, just yesterday, he's like taking off headlines and, it's all sorts of things because he doesn't have a good feel for human emotion and, to use Steve Jobs' phrase, what will make our hearts sing. On the other hand, he can look at, the big one, let's say, was they were using a carbon fiber composite to make the rocket ships like Boeing and everybody else does. And it was complicated to do, and he's walking there in the factory. He says, we can make it out of stainless steel. It's cheaper, it's easier, you can roll it outside, you don't need, and they say, well, no, it's going to be heavier. He said, no, if you understand the properties of stainless steel at high temperatures and the low temperatures where the frozen gas fuel would be, he said, we can make it this thin, this number of millimeters, nose cone this way, and it'll actually be a stronger, lighter rocket out of stainless steel. They think he's nuts. But week after week, they keep trying it. And now look at the back, you got the back of the cover of the book there, hold it up. That's the other way, that's Starship, and it's all stainless steel, and so is the Cybertruck.
So when they write the book on you one day, they're going to talk about your moments. I imagine there's so many moments over the last 2 years. But it all comes back to high school.
Of course, everything goes back to Newman.
Tell the story about being at the Newman game.
Oh, you mean recently? It deals with the fact that Musk is the only company that's been able to recreate the internet in outer space and communications. And so he creates Starlink, where he's got more than almost 5,000 satellites. And when Russia invades Ukraine, the Viasat communications that keeps the troops in Ukraine communicating is knocked out. So are the military satellites. And they beg him, save us. And his is the only satellite systems the Russians can't knock out. So he sends the first night, I think, a couple of hundred, then 1,000 or so free Starlink services, and saves Ukraine from being crushed right away. That was in March or April. Fast forward to September, and after spending a grueling couple of weeks with him, I'm back home in New Orleans, and I'm at the Newman football game. And you know why, right?
Arch Manning.
Arch Manning, one of his last games, we had to see him play. And, text message, call Elon. So I finally go behind the bleachers, those bleachers, because it's, and he says, well, they're using Starlink, the Ukrainians are, to launch a sneak attack on the Russian fleet in Crimea. And that's going to start probably a tactical nuclear response. I'm going to be involved in World War III. And we've decided not to allow Ukraine to do it. And I actually had to correct something because I said he turned off the Starlink for Crimea. It actually was a geofencing. That was a movable and the Ukrainians didn't know, so they were using Starlink, and they were begging him because they realized the drone subs were all of a sudden losing radio contact or satellite contact. And he decided that night not to enable Ukraine to do this sneak attack. And the essential question, whether he decided that night or earlier he had geofencing, was how does he have so much power? And should a mercurial private citizen have the power to do that? The answer is no. But then you go to the second level, which is how did he have so much power? Well, because Boeing and NASA and the Defense Intelligence, nobody has been able to launch these satellites and get the rockets to land upright and reuse them right away and do it. So one reason he had the power is that his intense personality did it. And we ended up communicating a bit, and I don't give him advice, I'm just the observer. But I did ask, have you talked to General Mark Milley? Have you talked to Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor? And he did talk to them. He had been talking to Milley, and he finally decides to sell or contract a certain number of Starlink satellites to the US military and the intelligence agencies, because he shouldn't really have that power, and he realized it. So now the US government has the power. And he said to me, I remember that evening, how did I get in this war? I made Starlink so people could watch Netflix and chill and play video games. Why am I in the middle of something that could be World War III? So even he sometimes feels he has too much influence.
What did you think? I'm at the new game and I'm having this conversation. What did you think?
I thought that he should talk to General Mark Milley. My opinion is, about as informed as the average opinion in this room, with all due respect to you all. I don't know whether he should be allowing sneak attacks on the Russian fleet, but I do know, look, when I was at CNN, we had some of these calls to make. Osama bin Laden would send tapes, and the question is, do we air them? And what do we do with the physical tapes? And I realized, well, as a pretty good citizen or whatever, I would call, it was National Security Advisor at the time, Steve Hadley, and I'd say, here's the deal, and they would send somebody to pick up the, but I guess my feeling was, I don't know the answer to this, but you probably should talk to people who at least are paid to be the experts in such things.
And then you went back to the game.
I don't know if you remember that game. It was like 62-0. I mean, Arch, whenever he let the ball go, it was, somebody just reeled it in for a touchdown. There's, by the way, Jonathan Martin, who now sort of lives here, New York Times, Politica. So he was at the game with me, and I couldn't really tell him what was happening because I thought this is a bit. But after it came out, he validated it because he had done a selfie with me in the bleachers, and you see him and me smiling goofily, and then you see old Archie Manning sitting there with Olivia, going like this, and there's poor Cooper, who is like really worried about Arch, and so you could see the whole scene of a great Newman game.
With the whole Twitter story and saga was interesting is towards the end of trying to make a decision, he went to play Eden Ring?
Elden Ring. Come on, man.
Elden Ring.
How many people here have played Elden Ring?
Oh,
all right, we got some. Ajit's played it, right? It's got many levels of the game, and it took him till 5:30. What's it called? Caelid, which is the last hellscape that you have to get through to conquer that game. And he's addicted to this. And he stays up all night till 5:30 in the morning with Grimes, his girlfriend, in Vancouver. And he finally wins the final hellscape of Elden Ring. And then he sends out a message, I made an offer. And so it was in that mindset that he announced that he was buying Twitter, going hostile on Twitter.
Is there a link between his gaming and,
Yeah, there's a section of the book that will appeal to, obviously not you since you're not a gamer, but called The Lessons of Polytopia, because that's his other addiction. Another sort of game, a strategy game you play on your iPhone. And he brought certain lessons from it, including a lesson which I would not try to learn, but he believes, which is empathy is not your friend. I think he believes we are in a video game and we're all avatars for a simulation.
I'm intrigued by your conversations with Elon's about his vision and concerns about AI. And where are we going with this and how do you think?
Yeah, that was his third great quest as a child who had read Asimov's robot stories and worried that robots could harm humanity unless you follow the rules of robotics that Asimov sets out. And so he is worried. He meets Demis Hassabis, who found a deep mind, and he invests in it because he wants to have it be open source and guardrail. And then Demis sells DeepMind to Google, which drives Musk nuts. So Musk and Sam Altman start OpenAI, which is supposed to be open source, and then Sam closes the algorithm, so it's not open source, and makes it a for-profit arm. It had been a nonprofit, and sells part of it to Microsoft. So this is Musk's deepest worry, that Google and Microsoft will create evil AI. And so right as I was writing the book and finishing it around March or April of this year, he said, you got to come back to Austin. I got one more thing to tell you. So I go back and we sit, Siobhan Zillis, who runs Neuralink, which is the chip company that allowed chips in the brain to communicate to computers, which he feels is part of the AI solution, to have a brain machine interface like that. We sit in, and she's the mother of two of his children, so we sit in the back of her porch, overlooking a little swimming pool in suburban Austin. And in a very serious way, he says, I'm going to have to start an AI company, of course, called XAI, because he loves that letter. And the interesting thing is, he believes that the real holy grail is not chatbot, large language model, generative predictive intelligence, and transformers. It's real world AI that can learn from video, learn from seeing things, have visual learning, hearing learning, as well as language model learning. So we can do things like a self-driving car. And he was in the process then, as he and some of the people in the book, Deval Shroff and others, about changing full self-driving, his autopilot at Tesla, into being, instead of a algorithm rules-driven AI, where see a red light, stop, see a pothole, slow down, it was something that was a machine learning AI function, where it trained on 1 billion frames of video per week of Tesla cameras, and would learn how to drive by watching how humans did it. And that's the way, obviously, a ChatGPT works, which is it learns from reading all the documents. And you think about anything in life, like how do you eat spaghetti? And you maybe have certain rules. Parents say, hey, use your fork, but you mainly learn by watching other people do it. And so that's his vision of what he calls, artificial general intelligence based on real world that will create self-driving cars and Optimus the robot that'll be able to navigate the real world.
I saw a podcast with you and Sal Khan, another New Orleanian.
He actually comes from Kenner.
Oh. I'll take that back. Let me. AI in education. What are your thoughts, obviously, with your work with Teach for America?
That's one of the biggest things. Kathy and I happened to be with Sal and his wife maybe a weekend or two ago at some place. And I got to remember to sign up tonight. He's created Con Amigo, which is, I like moonshot missions.
Yeah.
And that mission is every kid on this planet will have a personal tutor, lifelong personal tutor, that remembers everything he's learned or she's learned or mistakes made, and will just step by step guide you from history to algebra to science. And that is, when you look at large language model AI, it was a huge deal when ChatGPT comes out. I remember it from my class at Tulane, everybody's going nuts. It's now still a huge deal, but it's like, okay, what are we really going to apply it to? And you can apply it to everything from airline reservations to, but one of the best things would be that you try to equalize the playing field for every kid in every zip code in every country, that they have his or her own personal tutor.
That would be amazing for New Orleans, huh?
Yeah, there's some discussion of foundations that could be here, where you could say, you want to move Louisiana up a notch? We'll start in Louisiana. Every kid in Louisiana has a personal tutor.
So you end the book your line goes, great innovators are risk-seeking man-children who resist potty training.
I say some great innovators. You don't have to do it.
They can be they can be reckless, cringeworthy, and sometimes even toxic. They can also be crazy, but crazy enough to change the world. So I know this is a big debate, but do you have to be half crazy to be truly innovative and genius?
You know, that is a big debate. After the Steve Jobs book comes out, Wired does a cover story on the book that's, do you have to be, actually they use a technical term, begins with A. And the answer is, of course, no. I mean, there are great people who haven't been. But that line you quote is, of course, a Steve Jobs line, which is in the famous Think Different ads. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, those who think different. And it ends with the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. In order to be a disruptor, you do have to be disruptive. That doesn't mean you have to be mean. But I know as I look at my own self, and I've worked at a lot of places, strengths and weaknesses, and you got to know yourself. I mean, that's the Delphi Oracle thing, because you don't want to try to be something other than you are. But I am not ever going to be an Elon Musk, which is why, despite what you say, nobody's going to write my biography. I write about the disruptors. But I always tried to be very nice, and sometimes, as Musk told me, it was self-indulgent, because I cared so much that the people in front of me liked me, even if they were like Lou Dobbs or Greta Van Susteren or something. And I should have, when I got to CNN, been more disruptive. But it wasn't something I had a feel for. I think there are great people, from Benjamin Franklin to Jennifer Doudna, who are very nice and care about and have empathy in other people's feelings. But sometimes there is a non-trivial correlation between being a disruptor and being disruptive. You just have to know how to keep it in balance, or maybe read the book and absorb the good parts that make somebody a disruptor, but say, and I'm going to avoid the dark strands.
So with all the lessons you've learned and everything you've seen, you and Kathy have decided to come back to New Orleans. Tell me
I
about
live about 3 blocks from here.
So why? Yeah, why'd you come back home?
I don't know, at St. Charles Avenue, I can look in the window where my dad lived in his retirement, right in the back of the Carroll. I can go down the street to Toro, where I was born, or to Newman, or to Tulane. And I love New Orleans. In New Orleans, when you look at innovation and creativity, sometimes it's in a place with just engineering, like Silicon Valley was. But now it's moving outward, because every great cradle of creativity, you can start with Florence in 1500, when Leonardo straggles from the village of Vinci and goes there as a misfit and becomes creative. Or Philadelphia, which has a diversity in the 1770s of, people who are Anglican and proprietors and Quakers and Jews and slaves and freed slaves, and that diversity. Places that have diversity that tends to be reflected in the music, the food, the mindset, the innovation, those are the cradles of creativity that move our lives forward and makes our hearts sing. I think New Orleans is up there with about 12 other cities in this country of having the right diversity and the right sparks of creativity to be not only a cradle of innovation, but also a delightful place to have dinner and hear music and be with friends at places like this.
Well, how would a guy like Elon come from New Orleans? Would New Orleans accept Elon?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, reason Florence was so cool in 1500 is it can accept a kid a young kid who comes in and who was born out of wedlock. His father didn't legitimize him. He was gay, he was left-handed, he was distracted. And the Medici kind of say, hey, this is our guy, and they accept him. New Orleans is very accepting of misfits, rebels, round pegs in the square hole, and the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world. But there's a real downside, which is what this building and you and the people in this room, I hope will try to change, which is not that New Orleans is not accepting of creative people, is that New Orleans doesn't buckle down and have a great software industry, have great jobs, have jobs from my, Tulane students who say, okay, I want to come back here, but I'm going to Austin for the time being. So we have to do what you're trying to do in this place and everybody in this room is trying to do, which is say, how do we create opportunities? How do we create startups? How do we create not just startups, but, we probably won't have Fortune 500 companies in excess, but small and medium-sized enterprises that make use of the creativity. And the biggest problem for New Orleans as a cradle of creativity is that the really smart people I teach at Tulane and the people who grow up here tend to feel that there are not enough opportunities here for entrepreneurship, startups, creativity, digital revolutions. I think we're doing real well in the life sciences revolution with Obatala and Tulane and the bioinnovation zones, but we have to do more in that small and medium size, like Lucid was when it was younger, places where people can get good jobs.
Okay, so before we go to questions, I got one last question because you got a bunch of entrepreneurs in here, and the common theme of what's next. So what would you think we should be thinking about? What are the ideas? What are the things that 1 to 5 years people are going to be starting to talk about? We got to get our heads around.
Yeah, I think there are 2 or 3 revolutions happening. When Bill Gates came here a few months ago, remember, for New Orleans Book Festival, I asked him.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, I asked him that question, what should the students be thinking about, what's next? And he said, AI. He said, I left Microsoft a long time ago, but I'm now back, almost full-time, in every product meeting, trying to figure out how we're going to weave AI into everything. I'm not sure New Orleans will be a cradle of creating the algorithms that OpenAI and Google and Microsoft have done. But the next phase is applying AI to every single thing that happens. And that's what Bill Gates says is the next wave. And that, we've already started with one, I'll say New Orleans person, even if he's from Kenner, that's saying, okay, I'm not going to invent AI, but I can make it so it'll be a tutor for every kid in this world. Or you can apply AI to everything from, craft cocktails and recipes, or to very serious things like law enforcement or traffic control. So I think New Orleans, and most important of all, apply it to the life sciences revolution. So you're using AI to do what some of the companies that have been founded here do, which is artificially test new treatments and drugs so they don't have to be done in human trials at first. So anything that happens here, I think, could benefit from being moved to the next quantum orbit by having AI applied to it.
Well, one is thank you. Everybody get a round of applause to Walter. We have 10 to 15 minutes. Anybody have a question, thought, comment? Gregory?
So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Also, thank you for being such an inspiration for New Orleanians around the world. I read Innovators. Really was wonderful and inspiring. Particularly, I was living in the Bay Area at the time. I'm wondering, looking at the characters in Innovators, starting with Ada Lovelace and all these amazing people, do you think there's something fundamentally different about Musk or is there something that's fundamentally different, or is he just another example?
I think he's another example in the continuum, although as anything with Musk, there's an order of magnitude more intensity to it. But if you look at the themes of the innovators, and thank you, you're one of 7 people I've met who read that book. Those of us who write biographies have this dirty little secret that we make it seem like one person goes to a garage or garret, has a light bulb moment, innovation happens. But it's actually teams of people, and that's what that book was about. But I think the innovators in that book, like Musk and others, tend to look at specific things. I'll just pick one, which was a theme in the book, which is making a tighter interface between our machines and ourselves. And that starts with Ada Lovelace, who believes that you can have the weaving machines using punch cards work with a calculating machine of Babbage and do anything that can be processed in symbols. But most importantly, it begins right after World War II, where the people who worked on missile defense systems like J.C.R. Licklider say that having video display screens allows a faster input-output between computers and human minds. All the way through Doug Engelbart and the creation of the graphical user interface. And then finally, the last meeting that Steve Jobs has at the end of that book at Apple, when he's shown the Siri technology, where you can talk to your machines. So you watch Elon Musk, and whether it's full self-driving or Optimus the robot, and then especially Neuralink, it's how do you take that to the next level? With a Neuralink chip, you'll have 10,000 times the bandwidth of communicating between you and your machines. And he feels that's part of a continuum of technology advancement, is not the type of people who believe that machines will leave us behind or artificial intelligence will lead to a singularity where humans become like pet dogs or something, but a period in which the symbiosis between humans and machines will always outpace what machines alone can do and humans can do.
Lisa?
Hey, well, thank you. Us who have followed Elon for a while kind of understand his fascination with X, and understand that he's always wanted to build what I think he calls a super app, like WeChat, etc. But as spectators who watched the transition of the brand, of him rebranding Twitter to X, it seemed very off the cuff. It seemed he hires a CEO, 2 weeks later he tweets out, puts the logo, all the stuff we all got to watch and enjoy. So my question is there a method to that madness? Is there a strategy behind it?
Well, it's definitely madness, it's definitely impulsive, but there is a strategy. I mean, 20 years ago he started X.com, which becomes PayPal, which is it was a payment system, but he wanted to keep it being called X.com and make it into a social network where people could be paid for creating things and content. And then Peter Thiel kicks him out and it becomes PayPal. And he felt PayPal was a sweet little name, like your pal who allows you to email him, but that's not him. He's an all-in hardcore person. And when he changed the name of Twitter, well, before he did, because he told me in April when he was pursuing it, it's going to fulfill my vision of X.com, and I hate all these stupid little blue birds and the notion of tweets, and that's all he had strong language for it. And I thought he's nuts. I said, man, it's a great brand name, and everybody loves it. I don't know now whether there was some insight into that madness, but he truly believed that a sweet little sandbox where anointed media elite people who were given their blue check marks saying sweet things, that's not what he wants. He wants a hardcore, you gotta produce, you get paid for content, all in app. And he just felt that there was something too precious and too cute for the intensity that he wanted, and so he renamed it X. I don't think I've moved far enough to think it was actually a good idea, but now I see where he was coming from. I mean, he explains it in the book, and, you know, maybe something else will come along. We kept looking for Blue Sky and all these others, but they've fallen by the wayside. To be the sweet little chirpy bird type playpen. But he knew what he wanted, and this wasn't impulsive. If you read the book, he's telling me in April of last year, I want to make this what X.com should have been.
Blake Bertelli. I have followed Elon for a while, and I'm also very much into an idea called effective altruism that
Yeah.
I know Elon references and has said of the leader of effective altruism, this guy named Walter Haskell, that he has, that's my philosophy. I really want to do the most for the world, which is, for those who don't know, is kind of a utilitarian idea. I have to say, following him, following some of his decisions, I don't know if I believe that he really feels this way.
I don't think that was a deep thought out utilitarian philosophy of how do we, and I think he believes, like when Bill Gates says, okay, I'm going to give you a 5-part plan for everything from climate to education. He believes that he will do more to help, sustainability on the planet by being hardcore in Tesla and keeping his money invested there. Likewise, he'll do more for humanity by making us a multi-planetary species or creating AI. So he's not into the philanthropy side of McCaskill's vision,
I
altruistic.
guess my question is, though, is he working it?
Yeah, he would, first of all, think so, that he has done more to help sustainability on this planet than any other single individual. And you say, you kidding? And then you think about it for a while and you say, all right, maybe so.
Maybe last question, Peter.
Hey, Walter.
Hi, Pete.
Quick question. So I thought it was really interesting early in Musk's career, especially at PayPal, it was the second time getting, quote unquote, ousted by Thiel and Hoffman and
Yeah.
that group. And he kind of said that he never wanted to be put in that position again. What does his leadership style or leadership team look like and type of people?
Well, if you survive his hardcore all-in intensity, and 85% don't. He fires people a lot. But if you're all in and hardcore, and you know how to deal with him, which is, don't just say, no, we can't do that, but just give him data after data and let him process it. He has teams around him who are astonishingly good. Starting with Gwen Shotwell, who for more than 20 years has been president of SpaceX, and a lot of people, Drew Baglino, Franz von Holzhausen, and Lars Moravy, who've been there for a long time at Tesla, and even Siobhan Zillis, who's been at Neuralink since the beginning. So I once asked Steve Jobs what was his greatest product, and I thought he'd say the Mac or the iPhone or something. He said, no, it's the team that built those, because that's the hardest thing to do. Musk does not win as being the easiest or best team builder, because he is tough. But if you make it through and you become part of that team, you're loyal and crazed and intense. And I'll end with this, which is just a little anecdote from this, like 3 days ago. I was in Los Angeles and did a LA Times book event. And I'll see coming over at the end, a tall, good-looking, shy Southerner, and it's Andy Krebs. Now, if you read the book, he's in the book, picture of him, and he's the one at the Starbase late at Friday night when Musk goes into demon mode because he doesn't have enough people working. And he just reams Krebs out. And then a week later, he hardly remembers it, and Krebs said, I'm sorry, and he said, no, I'm sorry. And then he ends up promoting Krebs. Krebs had a kid and moved back to Los Angeles and was scared to tell Elon, but quietly quit. I said, I'm sorry. He says, no, I'm going back. I can't not be part of the mission. And I said, good luck, and I hope your kid loves Boca Chica. Thank you all.